Hey, Diana. So great to
Hey.
have you here.
Yeah, excited to talk to you today.
Good. This video is going to help a lot of our students meet alumni and hear about your paths. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a series of questions to start off with. Where did you grow up? What high school you went to? And why did you come to Cabrillo?
All right. So technically, I am a local. So I grew up in Watsonville, kind of lived in Watsonville, Carlitas, Aromas. Currently live in Aptos, so definitely a local. And then what high school I went to, I actually graduated from St. Francis High, but I did attend every high school. So I attended Watsonville High, Aptos High, and then eventually ended up at St. Francis. I was a little bit of a problem child in high school, so that's why my mom put me in private school, St. Francis. So, yeah, I know Cabrillo and I know the area very well because I've lived there my whole life.
Mm. And what made you choose to come to Cabrillo?
Yeah, so I come from a first generation college, family. My mom and dad both did not, go to college, so they didn't really, one, save for college and two, understand the benefits of, going to a 4 year. Coming out of St. Francis, I did apply to a lot of 4 years and got in as actually a chemical engineering major. That was kind of the original plan for me. But my parents didn't really want to foot the bill, and I was a rebellious 17, 18-year-old and decided, if they're not paying for it, I'm not going. So I would say took a gap year, between St. Francis and going to Cabrillo, was a waitress, kind of hung out at the beach, hung out with my boyfriend, who's now my husband, and then realized I kind of have to do something. So I decided to go to Cabrillo because it was local and, it was an easy way to kind of ease back into college and I could pay for that, right?
Okay.
It was affordable, accessible and affordable.
Okay, so then what was your experience like at Cabrillo? And then how did you decide the field of engineering you wanted to go into?
Yeah, so I would say engineering was kind of always the plan for me. I did have a mentor in high school who kind of pushed me in that direction and exposed me to it. And I did, a summer in Massachusetts at Smith College, and I kind of got some hands-on experience and got to dorm there for a month and do different activities. So I would say that kind of put it on the map for me and made me realize that was a career path and option for schooling. And then as I started Cabrillo and I started taking some classes, especially chemistry, I was like, no, it's definitely not chemical engineering. It just seems so abstract and difficult. And I would say I kind of took, the intro courses and the math and the physics and tried to find what made the most sense for me, what was the most tangible, where were my people at, right? The like minds. And I think I really enjoyed my relationships and the civil courses because it seems a lot more tangible, right? It's like you're building a building, you're trying to figure out how materials react to different stresses. That seemed very tangible and less abstract. And for me, that was something that resonated well. I mean, I did have some bad times in some of the courses, but eventually that's why I chose civil. I like the very tangible, real, I could see what I'm building and what I'm doing kind of aspect.
Okay. And were there things at Cabrillo that resonated with you yeah. So tell me,
Y-
like, how did you
Yeah,
feel? Because you went to Cabrillo not by choice in a way, you know?
yeah,
So
yeah.
how was the experience for you?
Yeah, so technically Cabrillo wasn't my first choice, right? But I am immensely grateful that I went there. One is I was really doing it for myself, right? I had nobody was footing the bill for me. I was doing the thing, right? I had a job, two jobs on campus, all right? I worked at the PLC and Mesa, and I really was able to form a community, and it was a tight-knit community. It was a small group. I still keep in contact with a lot of people I went to Cabrillo with, and I felt like I wasn't doing it alone, but I was doing it for myself. And so when I started even looking at schools and transferring, that was something that was super important to me too. I didn't want to get lost in the numbers. I wanted to have a direct line to my professors. I wanted to have study groups where I can, work through those complex circuit problems that Carlos used to give us, right? Like, things like that. And so for me, I was very grateful that I went to Cabrillo. One, we got to admit it's in a beautiful area and I absolutely love the location and, proximity to the beach and the lifestyle. And also, I did get very tailored mentorship, tailored, right, schooling, and I felt very prepared when I went off to a 4 year. So for me, it was hindsight, one of the best decisions I've made to not go to a 4 year and just kind of take my time and really do it for myself and do it a little slower. But I think ultimately it's led to more success for me in
Mhm.
my career and personal life.
Cool. Okay, and then you chose Santa Clara, and you want to talk a little bit about your experience there.
Yeah. So, people kind of looked at me as though I was a little silly because I went to Cabrillo to save money and right make it accessible, and then I ended up at Santa Clara, which is a very expensive private school. But what was super important to me was that small class sizes, really having that close knit community. And when I looked at multiple schools that I was applying to and got into, that was the place I felt like I can do 2 or 3 years and I felt welcomed. So, putting the big, price tag aside, I was like, this is the school I want. And so then how can I make that happen? So, young Diana went and marched over to the admissions office and said, hey, I really want to make this happen, but I can't afford, I think at the time it was $55,000 a year, and had a conversation with one of their admission counselors. And they said, okay, we're going to see what we can do for you. And they gave me an amazing financial aid package, right? I just asked and they increased my package, I think another 10 or $15,000 a year. So ultimately I did pay, I'd say about half of the tuition, but they did really bridge the gap for me and it made it, at least a little bit more of an easy decision to go there,
Mhm.
right? Because it wasn't as steep of a premium. And I'll say I got so much out of, attending Santa Clara because it was such a small class size. I was able to interface with tons of companies. There was lots of networking and events, and I just felt like the premium I paid was so worth it. And it has really launched my career more than the two, I would say, like, years that I took in terms of gap and figuring things out while I attended Cabrillo. So that time has been more than made up in my career now. And so I'm grateful that I made that choice.
Great. So how about talk about some specifics at Santa Clara? It says you said that you were able to network
Yeah,
with so we're going to move now towards like working, like
yeah,
the internships and working as an
sure.
engineer, et cetera.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I will say is when you're in school, when you're in college, right, and you have uh, a crazy amount of work to do and studying, you have to really pick your extracurriculars wisely, right? What is going to benefit you from, a scholastic perspective and also a career building perspective. And when I was at Santa Clara, I took on a very strategic role where I was it was called the activities coordinator for ASCE, the American Society of Civil Engineers. And so what that did for me was anytime any company wanted to come and talk to Santa Clara students that were civil, or anytime we had career fairs or industry events, I was the gal that they had to talk to. So before they talked to anyone at Santa Clara University's civil program, they talked to Diana to schedule a room and figure out lunch or dinner. And so I think that gave me a lot of face time and really set the bar for other students. So when I was able to interface with different companies, when I was trying to find an internship and handing them my resume, it wasn't the first time they were talking to me at the career fair. I've already built a rapport with them along the way. So what I say to everyone is as you're picking your extracurriculars, pick something that benefits you in terms of building community and building that kind of camaraderie you need to get through the engineering degree. It's hard, but also that's going to, I would say, pay off in terms of career building, right? Internships and that. So, I mean, with that said, as the activities coordinator, I was able to get an internship with a local GC. I think that was technically what would be like my junior year. And I
And
worked
you
for
said
them.
GC, general contractor,
Yeah,
just so that
GC,
everybody knows.
general contractor.
Okay, great.
Apologies, I'm in the industry, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
I worked for block construction. They do a lot of schools, right? And they do like smaller projects. And so I was able to get an internship with them for April through August. So I was able to do it a little bit while I was in school as well, and then full time throughout the summer. Great experience, lots of hands-on experience, right? Writing, RFI. So as an engineer in construction, you write requests for information when things aren't clear. You take meeting minutes. So I was exposed to what my day-to-day would look like in the professional world. And I kind of liked it. It was a little bit of a hybrid between technical and, a lot of soft skills and talking to people and managing schedules and managing people. So I felt like, yeah, I could do this construction. And so that's what my first internship was. And then I also did some undergraduate research where I got a sizable grant to, study bamboo and
Oh,
like build different connections and test them to failure. And I was really weighing my options on do I want to go structural or do I want to do construction? And so that undergrad research allowed me to kind of explore more of that structural world, also with kind of a sustainability and, innovation lens on. And I like that, but I would say it was again a little abstract, so I kind of leaned on construction seemed very, tangible.
mm.
And so, that was kind of my, 2 summers while I was at Santa Clara, what I did. And then going into senior year and senior design, and figuring out what I was doing on the back end, I ended up talking to Turner Construction, who's a very large GC general contractor in the Bay Area in the world. And I got an entry level project engineering job out of college with them, and it seemed like a great fit. And they had lots of different projects, and seemed like a very large and stable company, great benefits. And it's like, okay, I'm doing construction. I don't want to do a master's and do structural, so that's how I ended up starting my career kind of post Santa Clara in the construction world with Turner. I can give you my whole now history of my progression in career. That's where we're going. You let me know.
I would like to, and I remember when we met at the lunch, the Women
Yeah.
in Engineering lunch, you were talking to current students about how to really like present yourself and really fight
Yes.
for yourself. So I think that's a really good thing for you to talk about. So,
Yeah, of
so you went
course.
from this company to this company, and how did you do that? And
Yeah.
ultimately, I do want you to talk about one project you really love. So
Okay.
let's go career steps first.
All right. So, career steps. I graduated from Santa Clara in 2014. And I started, 2 or 3 weeks immediately after with Turner Construction. They were the company I was with the longest. I was with them about 6.5, almost 7 years. So I was a, engineering assistant, and then I went to a project engineer. Most of my progression with them was on one major project, which was
Wow.
actually my favorite project because it was so complicated. And that's in San Jose. It's at Santa Clara Valley Medical Center. It's called Sobrato Pavilion. It was a brand new patient tower for 168 patients. It had, different pharma underneath and basement. It was complicated with the new site utilities. So I started there as I would call it. They start you off with the finishes, which is like carpet, paint, like low hanging fruit. But by the time I was, leading that project, about 4 years I did there, I was, leading claims and negotiating multi-million dollar contracts, right? So the progression was very quick because it was a challenging job where there was claims involved and there was a lot of lessons learned, and I was very eager and excited to be there, and they just kept throwing work at me and I would keep delivering. So there was a lot of progression there, and the team was great, long hours, but it was, it was a fun time. And once I completed that, it was like, what do we do with Diana now, right? Do we want to move her into another big project? And they thought, hey, she has built a good rapport with people. She knows how to speak to people. Let's put her in business development. So that's really where you try to win new work and build relationships with clients. So it's kind of the progression. So I was like boots on the ground, leading work, and then it was, hey, Diana, go do business development, try to get us new work and build and strengthen our relationships with different clients and also our subcontractors and suppliers that kind of help us build the job. So I did that for a little bit. We did win one or two jobs, which is, always nice. And then unfortunately, my mom passed away unexpectedly, and I was not really, I would say, as social or as excited to go out and talk to clients. And so I respectfully asked to, maybe switch roles because it wasn't the right time. And at that point, I ended up on a residential tower in San Francisco. And then I started negotiating contracts and getting that kind of off the ground. So I went from boots on the ground, closing out negotiating contracts, winning new work, and kind of setting up contracts to now helping projects really kick off in the contracting world in the pre-construction. So that's how I started to go from field construction into, the early planning stages. From there, COVID happened, and I would say, kind of unhealthy, and I decided to take a short sabbatical, I'll call it. So I took about 8 months off, quit my job with no plans, but a nice chunk of money in savings, remodeled a house down in Aptos, and then ended up taking on a new role with their competitor, McCarthy, who brought me on as an estimator, lead estimator. Um, and I was planning to be with them for a while and actually run the Dignity Health. So Dominican Hospital is got some work coming that's going to have a parking garage and some, renovations. Originally, they brought me on for that because it's hard to find people in Santa Cruz that are, willing to do this kind of work. Um, and that honestly just didn't really work out for me. I ended up pregnant unexpectedly. So I decided to make a career move at that point and say, I think I need to move away from the general contractor. And that's when I ended up in the consulting world. So I worked for, not related, Turner and Townsend. It's a big consulting firm. And I ended up as a project controls manager working for a confidential client who I cannot disclose, but they are a web search engine in Mountain View. So you can figure out who that is. And I was really brought on to help get a mega project off the ground and then also run and close out a parking garage. So did that for about 2 years, and then said company stopped some of their investments, right, with kind of the shift in the economy, decided not to move forward. And then I ended up working for a healthcare client, still with the same company, Turner and Townsend, Providence Health. and I ended up doing all their contracts and all their negotiations for large projects. So anything over 30 million. I had projects, from 50 million up to 750 million.
Wow.
And I would run what's called the RFP, so request for proposals, right? Trying to solicit bids, make sure we're getting the best value, and then I would say negotiating and sealing the deal on contract. So did that up until October, so recently, uh, of 24. And then I applied to a job with Genentech. So Genentech is a biotech pharma company who's really leading the way in terms of innovation and trying to, develop new medicines. And I'm a civil engineer working for these people, right? So
Mm,
it's a little strange, but I am here as a senior procurement delivery manager, where I am really focused on similar role, leading all of their mega capital projects. So anytime they're investing large dollars for new buildings and new lab space, Diana will help kind of run the request for proposals and then negotiate the contracts and seal the deal. So
nice.
that's my, I would say, kind of career progression
Yeah,
in a nutshell.
yeah,
I know you had a couple other
yeah.
specific questions, but
No, this
happy
is great. I mean, the idea is that once you have a bachelor's degree in engineering, you really could do anything.
anything.
So
Yeah.
many doors open. Just get the degree.
Yeah.
And you're just another example of how different roles and what you're doing is totally not related to your major, but the fact that you have this engineering degree, it gives you value. And anyway, cool. Okay,
Yes. A lot of
so
value.
a lot of value.
We solve problems. That's
That's
what
right.
we do. So
That's
just
right. Okay, so one question is, um, how has your quality of life been affected by having an engineering degree?
yeah, so my husband and I joke about this a lot and say, people say, "Oh, the best decision in life I ever made was like marry, your spouse." And I say, "You're a close second." I always tell my husband he's a close second to my engineering degree. Um, because really, just to share a little bit about myself, my husband is now a stay-at-home dad. So he's home with two toddlers. We are financially totally fine. We have a lot of flexibility in terms of, we can take vacations when we want. We have, I would say nice retirement and investment portfolios. And we're starting to save for our kids' college, right? And I would say break that cycle of,
Mm,
student debt and figuring that out. So I personally think it changed the trajectory of my life completely. And we joke and say, if you would have told us 5 years ago, even after I got the engineering degree, that I would have this role with this compensation and my husband staying home, living by the beach, we would have laughed you out of the room, right? Like there's just no way this can even exist. And here we are, I would say, living the best days, right? We just bought two cargo e-bikes and we throw our kids in the back. I work from home 2 days a week and in office three. And I make it a point when the days I work from home, I take an extended lunch and we, ride to the park and we ride to the beach and we get to have a great quality of life, and I'm very grateful for that.
mm,
And
mm,
I'm not afraid if something happens in terms of, I'm redundancy or if I'm laid off from a job, which has never happened in my 11 years in the industry. Um, that's okay. We'd be totally comfortable. We'd even, probably embrace a little break and time off and just move on with life, right?
mm,
So you do feel a sense of security with an engineering degree,
mm.
that I don't know if I would have got with, a different major.
Yeah, great. Okay, and then the last question is, um, what would you say to current students that are at Cabrillo now that maybe you didn't know, but just suggestions you have for them?
Yeah, so I will say it's hard. I'm not going to sit here and say it's not hard. An engineering degree is hard. Um, but I think there's a famous saying out there is like you choose your hard. So you could choose to just make it a hard college degree, do Cabrillo, transfer out, skip out on the parties, do the late nights in the library, because I'm telling you, the years that you're sacrificing to get that engineering degree will pay themselves off in the future. And I have colleagues that decided not to move forward with the engineering degree. A lot of them have moved out of state, like moved out of California. It's just too expensive to stay here, right, and compete with tech and things like that, especially in the Bay Area. And some classes suck. Like, I'm sorry, but I had a tough time. Like some of the Cabrillo classes I did not like, right? I did not like, Joanne reminds me, like I did not like surveying. I hated it. I didn't like going. I didn't like the Saturday labs. I did not like, calculus. I think it was the 5C series. I just did not like it. But I endured it. I got through it, and at the end of the day, it is nice to have a good GPA, and I'm not going to sit here and say I struggled and barely passed classes. That's not me. I graduated cum laude, so I did have, a very high GPA. But at the end of the day, you sacrifice, you make the changes, and you really put your nose down and grind at the beginning of your career, and when there's an opportunity that presents itself to expand your resume and really grow yourself and your how you can market yourself, that's where you need to take those opportunities. So in my 20s, there was times where I was commuting from San Jose to Novato, right? That's a far drive if you're not familiar. I think it's 80 or 90 miles one way in Bay Area traffic, but I did it because I didn't have kids and I wanted that certain experience to kind of grow my career. And I think that is what has differentiated me from some of my colleagues and peers, and that career trajectory and growth that we are talking about is being that, yes, I'm excited to be here, and yes, I could take that on, and I am willing to do what we need for the business. And that's how I've ended up in kind of these senior roles that maybe I'm underqualified for, but they seem to be, I would say, giving me the offers and liking what I'm
Yeah,
doing. So
yeah,
I think I'm in a good spot.
yeah. You're awesome.
Oh,
Thank you.
thanks.
It's so nice to be able to share this with students.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I was
Mm.
there once thinking, what the heck am I doing? Right? But it's worth it. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's worth it.
All right, let me stop the recording.